Before we dive into this absolutely incredible story of humanity's rise from cosmic laughingstock to galactic superpower, I need you to smash that like button right now. Seriously, hit it right now, because what you're about to witness is the most satisfying reversal of fortune in the history of the galaxy. And I want to know in the comments which moment gave you the biggest chills. Trust me, there are going to be several that will make you want to stand up and cheer for our species. The crystalline spires of Nexus Prime pierced the violet sky. Like frozen lightning, their surfaces pulsing with energy patterns that had remained unchanged for millennia. This was the seat of galactic power, home to the Galactic Council, where the fate of countless civilizations was decided by beings so advanced they had transcended many of the limitations that bound lesser species. High Chancellor Vex Mori materialized in the center of the Grand Assembly Chamber, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's ambient light into spectacular patterns. As a member of the Zenthari Empire, he had ruled over galactic affairs for over 3 centuries, his species having achieved technological mastery that made them natural leaders among the stars. Esteemed colleagues, Vex Mori's voice resonated through dimensions beyond sound, carrying harmonics that lesser species couldn't even perceive. We gather today to address the final item on our agenda, the minor species applications for Council membership. A ripple of what could only be described as barely contained amusement passed through the assembled representatives. Ambassador Kretak of the Vorthan hegemony, his insectoid form clicking with anticipation, leaned forward in his hovering chair. The ethereal collective's representative, Council Speaker Yelandra, flickered between visible and translucent as her energy-based consciousness focused on the proceedings. The application before us today, Vex Mori continued, his tone carrying the kind of condescension reserved for the truly pathetic, comes from a species that calls itself human. From a small blue world in an unremarkable star system they call soul. The chamber erupted in sounds that, if translated across species, would have been unmistakable laughter. Kretak's mandibles clicked in rapid succession, while Yelandra's form brightened with what passed for mirth among energy beings. Perhaps, Vex Mori said, raising one crystalline appendage to restore order, we should review their credentials. For educational purposes. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. The image showed a small blue-green planet orbiting unremarkable yellow star. Species designation: Homo sapiens. Technological classification: Prestellar. Primary energy source: chemical combustion and primitive fusion. Transportation methodology: chemical rockets that they literally set on fire and ride into space. The laughter grew louder. Several representatives were now openly jeering at the display. Communication technology: electromagnetic radiation. Conflict. Resolution: physical violence using projectile weapons that fire metal slugs using explosive chemicals. Ambassador Kretak stood up, his forearms gesticulating wildly. You cannot be serious, Chancellor. They use explosions to move objects? They throw metal at each other to resolve disputes? These aren't intelligent beings, they're barely past the Stone Age. Oh, but it gets better, Vex Mori replied, his form brightening with malicious glee. Their political structure consists of nearly 200 separate tribal units called nations that regularly engage in large-scale violence against one another. They have only achieved limited space travel within their own star system, and their fastest vessels would take over 50,000 years to reach the nearest inhabited system. The chamber was in chaos now. Representatives from dozens of species were expressing their disbelief and amusement in ways that transcended language. Barriers. The sheer audacity of such primitive beings applying for council membership was beyond comprehension. Furthermore, Vex Mori continued, clearly enjoying the spectacle. They claim to have achieved nuclear fusion, apparently proud of having discovered how to break apart the smallest components of matter. They consider this a major technological achievement. Council Speaker Yolandra's energy form pulsed with what could only be described as incredulous laughter. They're proud of nuclear fusion? My species transcended physical matter entirely 6 million years ago. We manipulate reality at the quantum level as easily as they manipulate those crude tools they're so proud of. The question before us, Vex Mori said, his voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity despite the continued laughter, is whether we should even dignify this application with a formal vote or simply dismiss it as the cosmic joke it clearly is. That's when Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood up. She had been sitting quietly in the designated observer section, an area of the chamber reserved for representatives of species seeking council recognition. At 53, she was one of Earth's most accomplished diplomats, a woman who had spent her entire career navigating the complex politics of human international relations. She had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and nuclear disarmament accords. She had faced down dictators, corporate oligarchs, and ideological extremists. None of that had prepared her for this. "Honored Council," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems, "I formally request permission to address the assembly." The laughter stopped abruptly. The idea that this primitive being would dare to speak in the presence of galactic leaders was so audacious that it rendered the entire chamber speechless. Vex Mori's crystalline form darkened slightly, the equivalent of a frown. "You are here as an observer-only human. You have no standing to address this body." "According to Council Protocol 7 Alpha," Elena replied calmly, "any species formally applying for membership has the right to present their case before final judgment is rendered." "I invoke that protocol." A murmur ran through the chamber. She was technically correct, though no one had expected a primitive species to actually know council law well enough to invoke it. "Very well," Vex Mori said after a moment, his tone suggesting he was granting an enormous favor to an undeserving child. "You may speak, but be brief. This assembly has more important matters to attend to." Elena walked to the center of the chamber, her simple black diplomatic suit a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments and technological augmentations of the alien representatives around her. She looked small, insignificant, utterly out of place. "Honored representatives," she began, "I stand before you today not to beg for admission to your council, but to offer humanity's hand in partnership. Yes, we are young as species go. Yes, our technology appears primitive compared to your achievements. But we bring something to this galaxy that I suspect has been missing for a very long time. And what might that be?" Kretek asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Innovation," Elena replied simply. "When was the last time any of your species developed truly new technology? When did you last face a problem that required you to think in ways you'd never thought before?" The chamber fell silent. It was not a comfortable silence. Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. "You mock our chemical rockets, but they took us from the surface of our world to other planets in less than a century. You laugh at our fusion power, but we developed it from first principles using nothing but our own ingenuity. You dismiss our projectile weapons, but they allowed us to survive on a planet where virtually every other large species was stronger, faster, and better armed than we were." "Primitive survival instincts," Yolandra interjected, her energy form flickering with dismissal. "You developed these crude technologies because you had no choice. Any species can develop simple tools when faced with extinction." "Perhaps," Elena acknowledged. "But here's what I think you don't understand about humanity. We didn't stop when we achieved survival. We didn't stop when we achieved comfort. We didn't stop when we achieved safety. We kept pushing, kept innovating, kept asking, "What's next?" even when we didn't need to. She gestured to the holographic display, still showing Earth and its solar system. You see a primitive species using chemical rockets. I see a species that looked up at the stars and decided to go there, even though we had no idea how. You see projectile weapons and think crude technology. I see a species that refused to accept that bigger, stronger creatures should automatically win, so we invented tools to level the playing field. These are the boasts of a primitive mind, Vexmori declared. Your species has achieved nothing that was not inevitable given enough time. Any sufficiently motivated species will eventually develop basic space travel and energy manipulation. There is nothing special about what you call innovation. Elena smiled then, an expression that somehow managed to be both polite and deeply unsettling. With respect, Chancellor, I think you're wrong, and I think, given time, we'll prove it. The Sonntag vote, when it came, was unanimous. 47 species voted to reject humanity's application for council membership. 0 voted in favor. 3 abstained, though they later claimed their voting systems had malfunctioned. As Elena gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Vexmorius' voice followed her. "Human," he called out, his tone carrying a mixture of amusement and something that might have been warning. "Your species shows spirit, perhaps in a few thousand years, when you've learned to think beyond your primitive impulses, you might be worthy of reconsidering. Until then, we suggest you focus on achieving basic civilizational competence." Elena paused at the chamber's exit and turned back to face the assembled council. "Chancellor Vexmori," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "I want you to remember this moment. Remember this conversation. Because someday, sooner than you think, you're going to realize that the biggest mistake your civilization ever made was underestimating ours." She left the chamber to the sound of renewed alien laughter. None of them were laughing 3 months later. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in the sparse conference room of Earth's Galactic Embassy, a modest facility that had been established in the neutral zone between council territories. The embassy was little more than a converted cargo station, a far cry from the magnificent crystalline palaces that housed the diplomatic missions of recognized species. "They didn't just reject us," she said to the 2 other humans in the room, her voice carrying a mix of anger and determination. "They humiliated us, made us into a cosmic joke." General Marcus Kane, Earth's military attaché, leaned back in his chair. At 61, he had spent 4 decades studying warfare in all its forms, from ancient tribal conflicts to theoretical space combat scenarios. He was a man who understood power in its rawest form. "Elena, with all due respect, what did you expect?" We walked into a room full of beings who have been running the galaxy for millions of years and asked them to accept us as equals. From their perspective, we're barely more intelligent than the wildlife on their homeworlds. "That's exactly the problem," said Dr. Sarah Chun, looking up from her tablet. At 38, she was one of Earth's most brilliant theoretical physicists, a woman who had spent her career pushing the boundaries of human understanding of reality itself. "They think they understand us. They think they know what we're capable of. But Marcus, Elena, I've been analyzing their technology, their scientific achievements, their entire technological base." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with complex diagrams and equations. "Look at this. The Xanthari Empire, they've been using the same faster-than-light travel technology for over 50,000 years. Same energy generation methods. Same communication systems. Same weapons. Same everything. So?" Marcus asked. "If it works, why change it? Because that's not how innovation works. Sarah's voice carried the excitement of someone who had just made a crucial discovery. Innovation isn't just about solving problems. It's about asking questions that no one thought to ask before. These species, they've achieved technological maturity. They've solved all the problems they can think of, so they stopped thinking of new problems to solve. Elena leaned forward, beginning to understand where Sarah was going with this. The Vorthen. Hegemony, Sarah continued, masters of biological manipulation. They can engineer life forms to precise specifications, create entirely new species from scratch. But they've been using the same techniques for 300,000 years. They've perfected their craft, so they stopped trying to improve it. And the Ethereal Collective, Elena added, her diplomatic training allowing her to see the pattern, beings of pure energy who can manipulate matter at the quantum level. But they transcended physical existence so long ago that they've forgotten how to think like physical beings. Exactly. Sarah's excitement was building. They've all become specialists, experts in their particular domains. But specialization is the enemy of innovation. When you become the ultimate expert in one way of doing things, you lose the ability to imagine that there might be other ways. Marcus frowned, his military mind working through the implications. You're saying they're vulnerable because they're too advanced? I'm saying they're vulnerable because they've stopped advancing, Sarah corrected. They've reached what they consider perfection, so they've stopped trying to improve. But humans, we're still in our innovation phase. We're still asking what if and why not, and how can we do this better? Elena stood up, beginning to pace as the full scope of the opportunity became clear. So what you're telling me is that we walked into that chamber thinking we were facing superior beings, when in reality we were facing beings who have forgotten how to be superior. More than that, Sarah said, her voice growing quiet with the magnitude of what she was suggesting. I think we have capabilities they don't even understand. Technological approaches they've never considered. Solutions to problems they didn't know they had. Marcus's expression had shifted from skepticism to intense interest. What kind of capabilities? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. Marcus, what would you say if I told you that we've had working prototype FTL technology for 6 months? The silence that followed was profound. I'd say you're lying, Marcus said finally. FTL travel is impossible according to human physics. Einstein proved that nothing can travel faster than light. Einstein was working with incomplete information, Sarah replied. He didn't know about quantum entanglement effects in folded spacetime. He didn't know about the Albrecht-Krauss metric manipulation possibilities. He couldn't have known because the mathematics required didn't exist until last year. Elena stared at her. Sarah, are you telling me that Earth has faster than light travel technology? I'm telling you that Earth has technologies that make the aliens advanced. Systems look like stone knives and bear skins. We've just been keeping them classified while we figured out how to use them safely. Marcus leaned forward. How is that possible? How could we have developed technology that advanced civilizations haven't achieved? Because we approach the problems differently, Sarah explained. They developed their FTL technology by manipulating gravity fields, a brute force approach that requires enormous amounts of energy and creates massive spatial distortions. We developed ours by convincing space-time that two distant points are actually the same point. It's elegant, efficient, and completely undetectable by their sensor systems. They'll see it as impossible, Elena said, her diplomatic mind already working through the implications. They'll see it as impossible because according to their understanding of physics, it is impossible. But that's because they've been thinking about physics, the same way for so long that they've forgotten there might be other ways to think about it. Elena stopped pacing and turned to face her colleagues. How much of our technology have we been hiding? Practically all of it, Sarah admitted. The chemical rockets they mocked? Those are just for moving cargo around the solar system. Our actual space vessels use reactionless drives that they couldn't detect if we parked one right next to their sensors. The fusion power, they thought, was primitive? Marcus added, beginning to understand the scope of the deception. We've been using fusion for public consumption while running our actual infrastructure on zero-point energy extraction. The projectile weapons they found so amusing? Sarah's smile was becoming distinctly predatory. We've had directed energy weapons for 15 years. Projectile weapons are what we use for hunting and sport. Elena sat down heavily, her mind reeling with the implications. So when I stood in that chamber and told them we would prove ourselves, you were making a promise we can actually keep, Marcus finished. The question is, how do we want to keep it? Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking through 3 decades of diplomatic experience. Finally, she spoke. Carefully, we let them continue to underestimate us while we demonstrate capabilities that force them to reevaluate their assumptions. We don't reveal everything at once. That would just make them feel threatened. We show them just enough to make them curious. And if they react badly to being proven wrong? Marcus asked. Elena's smile matched Sarah's for predatory intensity. Then we show them why it's a very bad idea to start a fight with a species that's still learning how to fight. 3 weeks later, the first demonstration began. Captain Sarah. Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the sensor displays with the calm confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire career. The ship around her was a masterpiece of deception. Externally, it appeared to be exactly what the Council expected from human technology, a crude, utilitarian vessel powered by visible fusion exhaust and bristling with the kind of obvious weapon systems that primitive species typically favored. Internally, it was something else entirely. Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the sensor station, we have 3 Xanthari patrol vessels approaching on Vector 7-7-Mark-4. They're requesting immediate compliance with inspection protocols. Understood. Open. A channel. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a Xanthari patrol vessel. Commander Gaetar materialized in the center of the human bridge, his crystalline form refracting the ship's lighting into rainbow patterns. Human vessel. Zektar's voice carried the casual authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. You are operating in Xanthari territorial space without proper authorization. Prepare to be boarded for inspection and processing. Captain. Mitchell nodded politely. Of course, Commander. We're just a scientific expedition studying stellar formation in this region. We had no idea we'd crossed into your territory. Ignorance is not an excuse, Zektar replied. Your primitive navigation systems are clearly inadequate for safe space travel. We will escort you to a processing facility where your vessel will be impounded and your crew will be assigned to appropriate labor duties. Labor duties? Mitchell asked, her tone carefully neutral. Your species shows promise as manual laborers. The Empire can always use additional worker resources. Consider it an opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization in the only way your kind is capable of. Mitchell exchanged glances with her crew. Around the bridge, humans maintained expressions of nervous compliance while their hands moved to concealed controls. I see, Mitchell said. And if we refuse? Zektar's form brightened with amusement. With what would you refuse? Your ship is armed with crude projectile weapons and chemical explosives. My single vessel carries sufficient firepower to reduce your primitive craft to its component atoms. Resistance would be inadvisable. You make a compelling argument, Mitchell acknowledged. Lieutenant Jackson, prepare for shutdown of all systems per the commander's instructions. Yes, ma'am, Jackson replied, his hands moving over his console. Initiating shutdown sequence now. The Prometheus's external lights dimmed and its visible exhaust plumes faded to nothing. On Xanthari sensors, the human ship appeared to be powering down in complete compliance with orders. Excellent, Zektar said with satisfaction. Your species may be primitive, but at least you're capable of recognizing superior authority. My ships will now take you in tow. Actually, Commander, Mitchell said, her tone shifting subtly, I think there's been a misunderstanding. What? Misunderstanding? Zektar demanded. You seem to think we're helpless. Mitchell nodded to Jackson. Lieutenant, bring us to combat status. What happened next violated every principle of physics that the Xanthari understood. The Prometheus simply vanished, not gradually, not with the telltale energy signatures of cloaking technology or dimensional shifting. It just stopped existing. In the space where it had been a moment before, Xanthari sensors registered nothing but empty vacuum where a starship had been seconds earlier. What? Zektar began, but his words were cut off as his ship's systems began reporting catastrophic failures throughout his small fleet. The Prometheus reappeared directly above the lead Xanthari vessel, close enough that its hull cast shadows on the alien ship's crystalline superstructure. But instead of the crude human vessel they had been tracking, what materialized was something that defied every assumption they had made about human technology. The ship's hull flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself in real time. Weapon systems that had been hidden beneath false plating emerged and deployed with the smooth precision of organic growth. Energy signatures that no Xanthari sensors had ever encountered blazed to life across the human vessel. How? Zektar started to say, but his words were interrupted by alarms throughout his ship. Commander, one of his subordinates reported, his voice tight with panic, our weapon systems are offline. Engineering reports that our plasma conduits have been severed, but there's no indication of how. Navigation is down, another voice added. Propulsion is showing cascade failures throughout the entire drive matrix. Captain Mitchell's voice came over their communication system, calm and professional. Commander Zektar, this is Captain Mitchell of the Earth vessel Prometheus. Your ships have been disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are unharmed, and your vessels will be fully repairable once you return to your home base. Zektar stared at the display, his crystalline mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This is impossible. Your weapons technology is primitive. Your sensors can't even detect our ship's weak points. How did you— Commander, Mitchell interrupted gently, I think the mistake you're making is assuming you understand our technology. You've been observing us for months, cataloging what you think are our capabilities, making assessments based on what you can see. But the thing about humans is that we've learned to be very good at showing people only what we want them to see. The Prometheus began to move, its reactionless drive creating no visible exhaust or energy signature. It circled the disabled Xanthari vessels like a predator examining prey. Your species has been flying the same ship designs for 50,000 years, Mitchell continued. You've been using the same weapons, the same tactics, the same strategies. You've perfected everything you know how to do, so you've stopped learning how to do new things. This is impossible, Zektar repeated, his voice carrying a note of desperation. Your species hasn't had space travel for more than a century. Our technological supremacy has been established across millions of years of development. And that's exactly the problem, Mitchell replied. You've spent millions of years perfecting old solutions instead of discovering new problems. Commander, when was the last time your species invented something genuinely new? When did you last encounter a challenge that required you to think in ways you'd never thought before? The silence from the Xanthari ships was profound. Here's what's going to happen, Mitchell said. We're going to leave now. Your ships will recover full functionality in approximately 6 hours. When you return to your base, you're going to file a report describing exactly what happened here. You're going to tell your superiors that you encountered a human vessel that demonstrated technological capabilities beyond your understanding. They won't believe me, Zektar said quietly. Then you're going to show them this. The Prometheus's hull began to glow with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Space around the ship seemed to bend and twist, as if reality itself was becoming negotiable in the vessel's vicinity. We're going to demonstrate something that your physics says is impossible, Mitchell announced. We're going to travel faster than light without using any technology you can detect or understand. We're going to move from this point to a position 16 light hours away, and we're going to do it in 16 minutes. Faster than light travel requires massive energy expenditures, Zektar protested. The gravitational distortions alone would be detectable across half the galaxy. Not if. You're doing it right, Mitchell replied. The Prometheus folded space around itself and disappeared. This time, Xanthari sensors registered exactly how it had happened. The ship convinced local space-time that its current position and its destination were the same location, allowing it to be in both places simultaneously before resolving the paradox by choosing to exist only at the destination. It was elegant, impossible, and completely undetectable until the moment it happened. 16 minutes and 37 seconds later, the Prometheus reappeared exactly where Mitchell had said it would, 16 light hours away. The precision was perfect. The energy expenditure was virtually zero. The implications were staggering. Commander Zektar, Mitchell's voice came over their communication system one final time. When you file your report, I want you to include one additional message for your superiors. Tell them that this was us being polite. Tell them that we prefer diplomacy to conflict, cooperation to dominance, partnership to conquest. But also tell them that we're very, very good at adapting to whatever approach others choose to take with U.S. The transmission ended. The Prometheus vanished again, this time without any detectable energy signature or spatial distortion. It simply stopped being there. Zektar stared at the empty space where the impossible human ship had been, his crystalline mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. Around him, his crew worked frantically to restore their ship's systems, their voices tight with confusion and barely controlled panic. For the first time in his 3-century career, Commander Zektar had encountered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. He was not going to enjoy filing this report. Hey there, incredible humans. I know we're just getting started, but I already need to pause and ask, are you feeling those chills yet? Because watching humanity go from primitive mammals to what the hell just happened in the span of a few months is giving me serious goosebumps. Smash that like button if you're ready to see the aliens realize just how badly they've underestimated us. And let me know in the comments which moment has surprised you most so far. The emergency session of the Xanthari High Command convened in the Crystal Cathedral that served as the Empire's military nerve center. War Commander Thecalon materialized at the center of the assembly, his massive crystalline form radiating the kind of controlled fury that comes from having one's fundamental assumptions about reality shattered. "Explain to me," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's crystalline walls vibrate, how a primitive species using chemical rockets and projectile weapons managed to disable 3 of our patrol vessels without firing a single shot that our sensors could detect. Commander Zektar stood in the witness configuration, his form noticeably dimmer than usual, the crystalline equivalent of exhaustion and stress. "War Commander, I have reviewed the sensor log 17 times. I have consulted with our best technological analysts. I have run every possible diagnostic on our ship systems." He paused, his form flickering with uncertainty. The humans appear to possess technological capabilities that our science indicates are impossible. Impossible, Declan repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Commander, are you telling me that our million-year technological supremacy has been challenged by mammals who discovered fire less than 200,000 years ago? War Commander, I am telling you that these mammals disabled our ships using methods that violated the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. They moved their vessel instantaneously across distances that should require hours of travel. They targeted our systems with precision that suggests they understood our technology better than we do. The chamber fell silent. Around the edges of the assembly, other Xanthari commanders exchanged glances that conveyed volumes. The idea that any species could outmatch Xanthari technology was so fundamentally incomprehensible that many of them were questioning the reliability of Zektar's report. Show them, Thekalan commanded. The chamber's central projection system activated, displaying the sensor recordings from Zektar's encounter with the Prometheus. The assembled commanders watched in growing disbelief as the human vessel simply vanished from existence, reappeared in an impossible position, and then demonstrated faster-than-light travel using principles that their science said couldn't work. When the recording ended, the silence stretched for long moments. Analysis, Thekalan demanded. Chief Technology Analyst Mordoon materialized beside the projection display, his form crackling with the rapid data processing that characterized his subspecies. War Commander, I have examined these recordings with every analytical tool at our disposal. The human vessel appears to utilize a form of spatial manipulation that operates outside our understanding of dimensional mechanics. They're faster than light. Technology produces no detectable gravitational signatures, no energy expenditure that our sensors can measure, and no spatial distortions that conform to known physics. Are you suggesting that they have developed technology that is superior to ours? Morden's form flickered with uncertainty. War Commander, I am suggesting that they have developed technology that approaches fundamental forces in ways we have never considered. Their methods are not superior to ours, they are completely different from ours. Thekalan absorbed this information, his military mind working through the implications. Different how? Our FTL technology functions by generating massive gravitational fields that compress space-time, allowing us to traverse great distances by essentially making those distances shorter. It requires enormous energy expenditure and creates detectable spatial distortions that can be observed from considerable distances. And their technology appears to function by convincing space-time that the origin point and destination are the same location, eliminating the need to traverse the distance at all. It requires virtually no energy and creates no detectable signatures until the moment of transition. The implications were staggering. Xanthari military doctrine was built around the assumption that FTL travel was detectable, predictable, and energy-intensive. Enemy movements could be tracked, anticipated, and countered. But if humans could move their ships without any detectable signatures, ... double quotes, how is this possible? Thekalan demanded. How could a primitive species develop technology that operates on principles we haven't discovered in over 1 million years of scientific advancement? Morden's form brightened with what might have been insight. War Commander, perhaps that is precisely why they developed it. We have spent 1 million years perfecting our existing technologies, optimizing and refining methods that we know work. But optimization is not innovation. We have become so efficient at doing things the way we've always done them that we've stopped looking for entirely new ways to do them. You're suggesting that their primitiveness is an advantage? I am suggesting that their lack of preconceptions about correct methods allowed them to discover methods that we would have dismissed as impossible. We know that faster-than-light travel requires massive energy expenditure, so we never investigated. Approaches that didn't require massive energy expenditure. They didn't know it was supposed to be impossible, so they found a way to make it possible. Vecalon was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that went far beyond military concerns. If humans could approach technological problems without the constraints of established knowledge, what other impossible solutions might they discover? "Orders, War Commander?" one of his subordinates asked. Vecalon's form darkened with decision. "Full military alert across all border systems. Institute immediate surveillance protocols for any human vessels or activities. And send a priority communication to the High Council. They need to know that our assumptions about this species require ... revision." But the Zenthari weren't the only ones whose assumptions were being challenged. On the trading hub of Kethmoran Station, Merchant Prince Velkoth of the Quidrian Trade Guild was experiencing something he had never encountered in his 4-century career: economic panic. "Explain to me," he demanded of his chief analyst. "How?" "A species that was rejected for council membership 3 months ago is currently underselling our manufacturing cartels by 40% while maintaining superior quality standards." Analyst Quintel's tentacles writhed with stress as he consulted his data tablets. "Prince Velkoth, the humans have introduced manufacturing techniques that appear to violate basic economic principles. They are producing goods at costs that should be impossible while maintaining quality levels that exceed guild standards. Show me the specifics." The trader's private office filled with holographic displays showing production data, cost analyses, and quality assessments. The numbers told a story that made no sense according to established galactic economic theory. "Standard guild manufactured gravity generators," Quintel explained, highlighting one set of data, "require 847 standard time units to produce, utilize 12,000 units of rare materials, and cost 890,000 credits per unit to manufacture. Current market price, 1,200,000 credits. And the human versions? Functionally identical performance, 98 standard time units to produce, 3,000 units of common materials, manufacturing cost of 95,000 credits per unit. They're selling them for 600,000 credits and still maintaining a profit margin that our economists say should be impossible." Velkoth's primary tentacles curled with confusion. "How? Are they using slave labor, illegal automation, resource extraction methods that violate galactic environmental accords?" "No, Prince. We've investigated all those possibilities. There. Manufacturing methods appear to be ... revolutionary. Instead of building each component separately and assembling them, they're growing complete units using molecular-level construction techniques. Instead of mining rare materials, they're synthesizing them from common elements using controlled fusion processes. Instead of designing products to meet minimum acceptable standards, they're designing them to exceed maximum performance requirements. That's impossible. If such techniques existed, we would have developed them centuries ago." Quintel's tentacles writhed more frantically. "Prince Velkoth, that's what we thought too. But the humans appear to have approached manufacturing from an entirely different philosophical foundation. Where we focus on optimizing existing processes, they focus on eliminating the need for those processes entirely." The implications were staggering. The Quidrian Trade Guild had built its economic empire on controlling the production and distribution of high-quality manufactured goods. If humans could produce equivalent goods at a fraction of the cost using completely different methods, ... double count, how bad is it? Velkoth asked. "Prince, if current trends continue, human manufacturing will have captured 40% of our market share within 2 standard cycles. By the end of 5 cycles, we project that traditional Guild manufacturing will be economically non-viable in all but the most specialized applications. Volkov stared at the projections, his mind struggling to process the scope of the catastrophe facing his civilization. The Quadrian Trade Guild hadn't just been an economic powerhouse. It had been the economic powerhouse, the organization that had standardized galactic commerce for over 50,000 years. And it's not just manufacturing, Quintal continued, his voice carrying a note of desperation. Their shipping methods are revolutionizing interstellar trade. Where our cargo vessels require 6 months to transport goods from the core worlds to the rim territories, human ships are making the same journey in 6 weeks. How? The same spatial manipulation technology that their military demonstrated. They're moving cargo ships using reactionless drives that our physicists insist can't exist, through hyperspace routes that our navigators say are impossible to calculate. Volkov's tentacles drooped with the weight of realization. They're not just competing with us. They're making us obsolete. It gets worse, Prince. They're not keeping these technologies to themselves. The holographic display shifted to show trade agreements and technology sharing arrangements that defied every principle of galactic commerce. Standard practice, Quintal explained, is to maintain technological advantages through carefully controlled information distribution. Species share knowledge only when it serves their strategic interests, and always at a cost that maintains their competitive advantage. Yes, obviously. That's the foundation of profitable trade relationships. The humans appear to be sharing their innovations freely with any species that requests them. They're teaching manufacturing techniques to civilizations that have nothing to offer in return. They're providing shipping services at cost to species that can't afford market rates. Volkov stared at his analyst. That's economically insane. How do they maintain profitability if they're giving away their advantages? Prince, that's just it. They're not trying to maintain traditional profitability models. They seem to operate on the assumption that if everyone becomes more prosperous, there will be more total wealth to participate in rather than the same amount of wealth to fight over. That's... Volkov paused, his economic training warring. With the evidence before him, that's not how economics works. Prince, respectfully, that may not be how our economics works. But it appears to be how human economics works. Meanwhile, in the ethereal dimensions where the collective maintained its consciousness networks, Speaker Ylandra was experiencing something that pure energy beings rarely encountered, doubt. She floated in the quantum foam that served as the collective's primary communication medium, her consciousness interfacing with the vast network of minds that comprised her species. For 6 million years, the ethereal collective had existed as beings of pure thought, having transcended the limitations of physical matter through their mastery of consciousness manipulation. They were, by any reasonable measure, the most advanced species in the galaxy, which made the current situation all the more disturbing. Consciousness node 7394. She addressed one of her subordinates. Present your analysis of the human cognitive patterns we've been monitoring. The response came as a cascade of pure thought, data, and emotion transmitted at the speed of consciousness itself. Speaker Ylandra, we have encountered a cognitive phenomenon that our psychological models indicate should not be possible. Human thought patterns display a level of innovative flexibility that exceeds our theoretical maximums for biological consciousness. Elaborate. The humans appear to process information using cognitive methods that bypass the logical constraints that govern advanced consciousness. Where our thought patterns follow optimal efficiency paths, theirs follow what can only be described as creative chaos patterns. Ylandra's energy form flickered with confusion. Are you suggesting that their primitive biological brains are somehow superior to our transcended consciousness? Not superior, Speaker. Different. Fundamentally, incomprehensibly different. They approach problems by considering solutions that our logical frameworks would immediately dismiss as impossible or inefficient. This allows them to discover approaches that we would never investigate. Show me an example. The quantum foam around them shifted, displaying a complex analysis of human technological development patterns. Consider their faster-than-light travel. Development. Our consciousness modeling indicates that any rational species would approach FTL travel by manipulating gravitational fields, the most obvious application of advanced physics. This approach requires significant energy expenditure, but produces predictable results. Obviously, it's the logical solution to the problem. The humans approached it by questioning whether space and time were actually separate phenomena that needed to be traversed, rather than simply different aspects of the same phenomenon that could be manipulated. This led them to develop methods that our logic would have immediately dismissed as paradoxical. Yelandra processed this information, her transcended consciousness struggling with concepts that seemed to violate reason itself. Are you telling me that their inferior logic allowed them to discover superior solutions? Speaker, I am telling you that their willingness to pursue inferior logic allowed them to discover alternative solutions that we never considered because we were too logical to investigate them. The implication sent ripples of disturbance through the collective's consciousness network. For 6 million years they had operated on the assumption that transcended consciousness represented the ultimate form of intelligence. The idea that biological limitations might actually provide cognitive advantages was fundamentally disturbing. There's more, Speaker, the subordinate consciousness continued. We've detected human individuals whose cognitive patterns suggest they're developing rudimentary consciousness transcendence techniques. Impossible. Consciousness transcendence requires millions of years of guided evolution and technological augmentation. Speaker, we've identified human individuals who appear to be achieving limited transcendence through what they call meditation and creative visualization. They're developing the ability to directly manipulate quantum probability fields using nothing but focused intention. Yelandra's energy form darkened with something approaching fear. You're suggesting that humans might be capable of developing consciousness transcendence independently? Speaker, I'm suggesting that humans might already be developing consciousness transcendence using methods that we never discovered because we approached the problem from the assumption that it required technological augmentation. The silence that followed was profound, even by the standards of beings who communicated through pure thought. What do our projections indicate? Yelandra asked finally. If human cognitive development continues at current rates, they will achieve consciousness capabilities equivalent to our own within 50 standard cycles. If they continue to develop using their unconventional approaches, they may achieve consciousness capabilities that exceed our own. For the first time in 6 million years, the ethereal collective faced the possibility that their transcendence might not represent the ultimate evolution of consciousness. It was a deeply unsettling realization. But perhaps nowhere was the shift more dramatic than in the Galactic Council chambers themselves. High Chancellor Vex Mori stood in his private sanctum, reviewing reports that painted a picture of a galaxy that was changing in ways he had never imagined possible. For 3 centuries, he had presided over a stable galactic order where every species knew its place. Every civilization operated within well-established parameters, and change occurred at the measured pace that befitted advanced societies. That stability was crumbling. Summarize the current situation, he commanded his chief advisor. Advisor Kethran materialized beside him, his crystalline form flickering with data streams. Chancellor, we have received formal requests for audience from 17 different species in the past month. All of them are requesting mediation in disputes involving human trade practices, human technology sharing, or human territorial policies. Territorial policies? The humans have no recognized territories. Chancellor, that appears to be changing. 3 species, the Altarians, the Meridian Collective, and the Tory Assembly, have formally requested human protection from aggressive expansion by Council member species. The humans have agreed to provide defensive support in exchange for nothing. Vex Mori's form darkened. Nothing? No tribute, no territorial concessions, no trade preferences. They've offered military protection to 3 species in exchange for those species. Commitment to what the humans call peaceful development and mutual cooperation. That single quotes double quotes Vex Mori paused, his mind working through the implications. That's not how interspecies politics works. Protection arrangements require tribute. Military support demands territorial concessions. There's always a cost. Chancellor, the humans appear to operate according to political principles that we haven't encountered before. They seem to believe that their long-term interests are served by ensuring the prosperity and security of other species, even when those species can offer nothing immediate in return. Vex Mori was quiet for a moment, processing information that challenged 3 centuries of diplomatic experience. What about the economic disruption? Growing worse, Chancellor. The Quidrian Trade Guild has filed formal complaints about human manufacturing practices. The Vorthan hegemony is reporting significant defections among their biological engineering workforce. Even the Xanthari military is requesting emergency sessions to discuss technological assessment protocols. Are the humans intentionally destabilizing galactic order? Kethran's form flickered with uncertainty. Chancellor, our analysis suggests that the humans are not trying to destabilize anything. They appear to be operating according to their own principles without regard for the effect those principles have on existing power structures, which is destabilizing everything. Yes, Chancellor. Vex Mori moved to the chamber's viewing portal, looking out at the magnificent crystalline cityscape of Nexus Prime. For millennia, this had been the center of galactic civilization, the place where all important decisions were made by species wise enough and advanced enough to govern others. How many species have requested direct contact with human representatives? 43, Chancellor. And that number is growing daily. How many have requested permission to establish human trade relationships outside Council oversight? 31. How? Many have inquired about human membership requirements for what they're calling the Human Cooperative Alliance. Kethran was quiet for a moment before responding. 27, Chancellor. Vex Mori closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a changing galaxy pressing down on him. In less than 6 months, humans had gone from being a species so insignificant that their membership application was treated as a joke to being the center of a growing network of species that were questioning the authority of the Galactic Council itself. Cancel my schedule for the next month, he said finally. Chancellor, I'm going to Earth. Sir? If we're going to understand what's happening to our galaxy, we need to understand the species that's changing it. And the only way to understand humans appears to be to observe them directly. Chancellor, visiting a non-council world without formal diplomatic protection could be dangerous. Vex Mori's crystalline form brightened with something that might have been grim humor. Advisor, I think we're well past the point where our safety depends on maintaining diplomatic distance from humans. If current trends continue, our safety may depend on understanding them well enough to avoid making them our enemies. As he spoke, another priority communication arrived from the Xanthari Empire, marked with military urgency indicators that Vex Mori hadn't seen used outside of actual warfare. The galaxy was changing, whether the Council was ready for it or not, and at the center of that change was a species that 3 months ago had been considered too primitive to matter. Vex Mori, had a growing suspicion that the biggest mistake of his 3-century career had been agreeing with that assessment. 6 months after the Council's rejection of humanity's membership application, Trade Minister Liu Jiang stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Terra Station, watching cargo ships from dozens of different species, arriving and departing with a kind of efficiency that had never been seen in galactic commerce. At 47, Liu had spent her entire career in international economics, specializing in the kind of complex trade relationships that emerged when radically different economic systems attempted to work together. She had negotiated trade deals between capitalist democracies and communist states, between resource-rich developing nations and technology-advanced industrial powers, between traditional agricultural societies and cutting-edge information economies. None of that experience had prepared her for the challenge of revolutionizing galactic commerce. Status report, she requested from her assistant, a young economist named David Kim, who had volunteered for what everyone assumed would be a career-ending assignment to an impossible project. Minister, David said, consulting his tablet, we're now processing cargo volumes that exceed the capacity of any 3 Council trade hubs. Average processing time from arrival to departure has dropped to 14 hours compared to the galactic average of 6 days. Customer satisfaction ratings are... He paused, double-checking his numbers. They're literally off the scale. Several species have submitted formal complaints that our service standards are making other trade facilities look incompetent. Liu smiled. And our operating costs? Running at 67% of initial projections and dropping monthly as we optimize our automation systems. The efficiency gains from our integrated logistics AI are exceeding even our most optimistic estimates. Opposition? David's expression sobered. Growing. The Quadrian Trade Guild has filed 17 formal complaints with the Council about our disruptive practices. They're claiming that our efficiency standards constitute unfair competition. How exactly is being too good at our jobs unfair competition? According to their filing, we're undermining the established economic order by providing services at costs that make traditional facilities economically non-viable. Liu laughed, a sound that carried more than a little edge. So their complaint is that we're making them look bad by being better at what they do than they are? Essentially, yes. But Minister, there's something else. We've received a formal request from the Altarian Trade Commission. They want to learn from us. Learn what? Everything. They want to send a delegation to study our manufacturing processes, our logistics systems, our quality control methods, our customer service protocols. They're offering to share their agricultural biotechnology in exchange. Liu considered this. The Altarians were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced agricultural techniques, methods that could revolutionize food production on any world. Under normal circumstances, such technology would be jealously guarded, available only through expensive licensing agreements that favored the technology owners. What are they asking for in return? That's the strange part, Minister. They're not asking for exclusive access or licensing fees or territorial concessions. They just want us to teach their people how to think about manufacturing the way we think about manufacturing. They want to learn our approach, not just our techniques. Exactly. And Minister, they're not the only ones. We've received similar requests from the Meridian Collective, the Tauri Assembly, and the Venloth Republic. They all want to learn how to innovate rather than just optimize. Liu moved to the observation window, looking out at the impossible sight of dozens of different alien vessels working together with a coordination that defied every principle of galactic commerce. Vorthan bioships were offloading cargo to be processed by Xanthari manufacturing units, While ethereal energy constructs provided power to Quadrian assembly systems, 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been impossible. The various species barely tolerated each other's presence in the same star system, much less collaborated on complex industrial processes. David, what do you think would happen if we said yes to all of them? Minister, what if we started teaching our methods to any species that wanted to learn? What if we shared our innovations freely instead of trying to maintain competitive advantages? David's expression shifted to one of professional concern. Minister, that would violate every principle of strategic economic development. You don't give away your advantages. You leverage them to gain more advantages. And what if that principle is wrong? Ma'am? David, look out there. She gestured to the bustling trade hub visible through the window. 6 months ago, this was empty. Space. Now it's the most efficient trade facility in the galaxy, and it's getting more efficient every month. How? Because we brought together the best aspects of different species approaches and integrated them into something better than any of them individually. Exactly. We didn't try to dominate the market. We tried to improve the market. We didn't try to beat the competition. We tried to make everyone more competitive. And what was the result? David looked out at the station's operations, beginning to understand. Total cargo volume increased by 400%. Processing efficiency improved across all categories. Customer satisfaction reached levels that were previously theoretical. And our market share? We went from 0% to 37% in 6 months. How much market share do you think we'd have if we helped our competitors become more efficient? David's eyes widened as the implications hit him. If everyone becomes more efficient, total market capacity increases. If total market capacity increases ... the size of the pie gets bigger instead of us fighting over the same sized pie, Liu finished. David, what if the reason galactic commerce has been stagnant for millennia is that everyone's been focused on taking market share from each other instead of expanding the market for everyone? But Minister, that assumes that other species would be willing to share their innovations with us in return. David, in the past month, how many species have voluntarily shared technologies with us without being asked? David consulted his tablet, scrolling through diplomatic correspondence. The Altarians offered their agricultural biotechnology. The Venloft shared their mineral extraction techniques. The Tauri provided access to their atmospheric processing innovations. The ... double quotes he paused, counting. 14 species have offered to share major technologies, and we haven't formally requested any of them. Why do you think that is? Because David's expression shifted as understanding dawned. Because they've seen that we share our innovations freely, so they trust that we'll share anything they teach us. And what's the result? Exponential technological development. Instead of each species advancing independently, we're all advancing together, which means the rate of advancement for everyone is accelerating. Lou nodded. David, I think we're about to revolutionize more than just galactic commerce. I think we're about to revolutionize galactic civilization. How? By proving that cooperation works better than competition. As if to underscore her point, a priority communication arrived from the Quadrian Trade Guild. Liu accepted the transmission, and Merchant Prince Velkov appeared as a holographic projection in the center of the room. Trade Minister Liu, he said, his tentacles writhing with barely controlled agitation. We need to discuss the current ... situation. Of course, Prince Velkov. What can I do for you? You can stop what you're doing before you destroy the economic foundation of galactic civilization. Liu's expression remained politely neutral. I'm afraid I don't understand. Could you be more specific about what we're doing that concerns you? You're providing services at costs that violate economic reality. You're sharing technologies that should be protected intellectual property. You're creating efficiency standards that make established businesses look incompetent. Prince Velkov, are you asking us to be less efficient? I'm asking you to operate according to established economic principles. Which principles specifically? Velkov's tentacles writhed more frantically. Competition, profit maximization, technological advantage maintenance, market share protection. I see. And how have those principles been working for galactic economic development? They've maintained stable economic order for over 50,000 years. Prince, with respect, stable and stagnant aren't the same thing. When was the last time galactic trade volume increased by more than 2% annually? Velkov was quiet for a moment. Stable growth rates prevent economic disruption. Prince, in the 6 months since Terra Station opened, galactic trade volume has increased by 41%. Processing efficiency has improved by an average of 63% across all major trade routes. Customer satisfaction has reached levels that most species didn't know were possible. Those numbers are unsustainable. They represent artificial inflation caused by disruptive practices. Prince, what if they represent natural growth that's been suppressed by inefficient practices? That's... Velkov paused, his economic training warring with the evidence before him. That's not how economics works. Prince, respectfully, that might not be how your economics works, but it seems to be how human economics works. Human economics is primitive. Prince, our primitive economics have produced results that your advanced economics couldn't achieve in 50,000 years. Maybe it's time to consider that there might be something to learn from our approach. Velkov was quiet for a long moment, his tentacles slowly settling into less agitated patterns. What would you suggest? He asked finally. Send a delegation to Terra Station. Let your economists study our methods. Let your logisticians observe our operations. Let your managers see how we approach the problems that you've been trying to solve for millennia. And in return, we'd like to learn about your distribution networks, your quality assessment protocols, and your customer relationship management systems. We think there are ways we could integrate your expertise with our approaches to create something better than either of us could achieve alone. You want to collaborate with your competition? Prince, we don't see you as competition. We see you as potential partners in making galactic commerce work better for everyone. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. I'll need to discuss this with the guild leadership, Velkov said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Prince, while you're discussing it, you might want to keep in mind that 14 other species have already decided that learning from each other works better than competing against each other. After Velkov's transmission ended, David looked at Lou with an expression of amazement. Minister, did you just convince one of the galaxy's most powerful economic leaders to consider abandoning the competitive practices that built his civilizations? Wealth? David, I think I just convinced him to consider whether the practices that built his civilization's wealth might be preventing his civilization from building even greater wealth. And if you're right? Lou smiled, looking out at the bustling trade station where dozens of species were working together in ways that had never been seen before in galactic history. If I'm right, David, we're about to see what happens when an Abidinon entire galaxy discovers that cooperation works better than competition. But not everyone was ready to embrace the new economic reality. Emperor Drakmar of the Xanthari Empire stood in his throne chamber, reviewing reports that painted a picture of economic catastrophe spreading throughout his domain. For over 1,000,000 years, the Xanthari had maintained their position as one of the galaxy's dominant powers through a combination of military might and economic control. Their manufacturing capabilities were legendary. Their trade networks spanned half the galaxy, and their technological innovations had set galactic standards for millennia. All of that was crumbling. "Explain to me," he demanded of his economic minister, "how a species that was rejected for council membership is currently outproducing our most advanced manufacturing facilities." Economic Minister Ulvax materialized before the throne, his crystalline form flickering with the data streams that characterized his subspecies. "My Emperor, the humans have introduced manufacturing techniques that operate according to principles our economists are struggling to understand." Elaborate. Traditional Xanthari manufacturing focuses on optimization, taking established production methods and making them as efficient as possible. We have perfected these techniques over millions of years, achieving efficiency levels that were previously thought to represent theoretical maximums. Obviously, our production capabilities are the finest in the galaxy. My Emperor, that's what we thought as well. But the humans appear to approach manufacturing from an entirely different philosophical foundation. Instead of optimizing existing methods, they eliminate the need for those methods entirely. The Emperor's form darkened. "Show me specifics." The throne chamber filled with holographic displays showing production comparisons that defied comprehension. "Standard Xanthari gravity generator production," Ulvax explained, "requires 847 time units, utilizes our most advanced assembly technologies, and produces units that meet galactic quality standards with a 3.7% failure rate. Acceptable parameters. Human gravity generator production requires 98 time units, utilizes techniques our engineers insist are impossible, and produces units that exceed galactic quality standards with a 0.2% failure rate." "How, my Emperor?" "They don't build gravity generators. They grow them, using molecular-level assembly techniques that construct the entire unit as a single integrated structure rather than assembled components." The Emperor was quiet for a moment, processing implications that challenged a million years of technological development. "Are they using technologies we don't possess?" "No, my Emperor. They're using the same basic technologies we've had for millennia, but they're combining them in ways that our engineering protocols would never permit." "Why not?" "Because our protocols are designed to optimize known methods, not to discover unknown methods. The humans appear to approach each manufacturing challenge as if no solution has ever been attempted before. That's inefficient." "Why reinvent solutions that already exist?" "My Emperor, that's what we thought as well. But by treating each challenge as unsolved, they consistently discover solutions that are superior to our established methods." The Emperor moved to his chamber's viewing portal, looking out at the vast industrial complexes that had been the foundation of Xanthari power for eons. "What are our projections if current trends continue?" Ulvex's S-form flickered with distress. "My Emperor, if human manufacturing capabilities continue to expand at current rates, traditional Xanthari production will be economically non-viable within 10 standard cycles." "And our response options?" "We could attempt to suppress human trade through military action, but our intelligence indicates that their defensive capabilities may exceed our offensive capabilities. We could attempt to steal their technologies, but our analysis suggests that their innovations depend on cognitive approaches that our personnel may not be able to replicate. Or we could attempt to learn from them." The silence that followed was profound. "You're suggesting that the Xanthari Empire, masters of galactic manufacturing for over 1,000,000 years, should ask a primitive species to teach us how to build things?" "My Emperor, I'm suggesting that our 1,000,000 years of experience may have taught us to think about manufacturing in ways that prevent us from discovering better ways to manufacture." Emperor Drakmer was quiet for a long time, wrestling. with concepts that challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which his empire had been built. What would such learning require? Cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives, shared manufacturing facilities where our personnel could observe human methods directly. And what would the humans want in return? My emperor. Based on their interactions with other species, they would likely want to learn from our technologies as well. They seem to operate on the assumption that both parties benefit when knowledge is shared rather than hoarded. The emperor paused, his worldview struggling to accommodate such alien concepts. That's not how technology transfer works. Advanced species don't share their innovations with primitive species without gaining strategic advantages. In return, my emperor, respectfully, the humans don't appear to consider themselves primitive. And increasingly, other species are beginning to agree with that assessment. The emperor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a changing galaxy pressing down on him. For 1,000,000 years, the Xanthari had been among the galaxy's elite species, their technological supremacy unquestioned, their economic dominance assumed. Era was ending, whether he was ready for it or not. Draft a communication to the human leadership, he said finally. My emperor, if we're going to learn how this new galaxy works, we need to understand the species that's creating it. As he spoke, another report arrived from the Xanthari border territories. 3 more systems had requested human trade partnerships. Citing the economic benefits that other species had experienced, the galaxy was changing, and the Xanthari Empire could either change with it or be left behind. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Drakmer was beginning to understand which option represented the greater threat to his people's future. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the newly constructed conference room of Terra Station, preparing for what might be the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. Around the table, representatives from 7 different species sat in chairs specially designed to accommodate their varied physiologies, all of them looking slightly uncomfortable with the unprecedented nature of what they were about to attempt. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings, Elena began, we're here today to formalize something that has never existed in galactic history. A voluntary alliance based on mutual cooperation rather than dominance hierarchy. Ambassador Zethara of the Altarian Trade Commission spoke first, her melodic voice carrying the slight harmonic distortions that characterized her species' communication method. Ambassador Rodriguez, the Altarian people have observed with great interest the human approach to interspecies relations. Your willingness to share technological innovations without demanding tribute or territorial concessions represents a fundamental shift in galactic politics. We appreciate that, Ambassador Zethara. But I want to be clear about something from the start. We're not offering this alliance because we think we're superior to your species. We're offering it because we think we can all accomplish more, working together than any of us can accomplish working alone. Trade Minister Colvis of the Meridian Collective leaned forward, his insectoid features reflecting curiosity. Ambassador Rodriguez, such cooperation requires trust levels that typically take centuries to develop between species. How do you propose to establish sufficient trust for meaningful collaboration? Elena smiled. Minister Colvis, I think trust is built through actions, not time. Over the past 6 months, humanity has shared fusion technology with the Altarians, manufacturing techniques with the Venloth, medical knowledge with the Tari, and agricultural innovations with the Meridians. In each case, we asked for nothing. In return, accept the opportunity to learn from your expertise. And what have you learned? Asked Coordinator Yilseth of the Tori Assembly. That every species approaches problems differently, and those different approaches often lead to solutions that none of us would have discovered alone. Coordinator, Your atmospheric processing techniques have revolutionized terraforming. Combined with Altarian agricultural methods and Venloth mineral extraction, we can now make hostile worlds habitable in decades rather than centuries. Defense Minister Hartok of the Venloth Republic, a being whose crystalline structure made him appear to be carved from living gemstone, spoke with the direct manner characteristic of his people. Ambassador Rodriguez, cooperation is attractive in theory, but what happens when our interests conflict? When resource allocation requires difficult decisions? When military threats require responses that some alliance members may oppose? Excellent question, Minister Hartok. The alliance charter we're proposing includes specific protocols for conflict resolution, resource sharing, and collective defense. But the underlying principle is that we make decisions together based on what's best for all alliance members, rather than having decisions imposed by whoever happens to be strongest. Scientific advisor Dr. Kel Myron of the Kethloni Research Collective, whose species had joined the discussions despite their traditional isolationism, raised what might have been a hand. Ambassador, the Kethloni have remained neutral in galactic politics for over 3 millennia, because we've observed that alliances inevitably become tools for stronger species to exploit weaker ones. How do you propose to prevent such exploitation? Within this alliance, Elena activated a holographic display showing the proposed alliance structure. Dr. Kel Myron, the alliance charter includes several safeguards against exploitation. First, decisions are made by consensus rather than majority vote, which means every member species has veto power over any proposal that would harm their interests. Second, resource contributions are based on capability rather than quotas, which means no species is forced to provide more than they can reasonably afford. Third, technological sharing is voluntary and reciprocal, which means every species controls what they share and receives something of value in return. And military protection? Ask General Vex Taurus of the Hegemony Defense Forces, whose species had requested alliance membership specifically because of aggressive expansion by Council powers. Any attack on one alliance member is considered an attack on all alliance members, Elena replied. But our military response protocols prioritize defensive measures and de-escalation over offensive action. The goal is to make aggression against alliance members costly enough to discourage, not to engage in preemptive warfare. Ambassador Zethara leaned forward. Ambassador Rodriguez, this alliance structure represents a radical departure from established galactic political norms. What makes you confident that it will work? Because it's already working, Elena replied. Over the past 6 months, our informal cooperation has produced technological advances that none of our species achieved in centuries of independent development. Trade volume between our worlds has increased by over 300%. Conflict resolution through mediation has solved disputes that would traditionally have required military intervention. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed economic and social metrics from the participating worlds. Alliance member worlds are experiencing unprecedented prosperity, technological advancement, and social stability. Crime rates are at historic lows. Scientific innovation is accelerating. Even artistic and cultural development is flourishing as our species learn from each other's perspectives. Trade Minister Colvis consulted his datapad. Ambassador, these results are impressive, but they represent a very short time period. How do we know these improvements are sustainable? We don't, Elena admitted. But Minister, how do we know that the current galactic order is sustainable? How do we know that the competition-based system that has dominated galactic politics for millions of years isn't reaching the limits of what it can achieve? She changed the holographic display to show galactic-wide trends over the past millennium. Technological development has stagnated, Economic growth has plateaued. Interspecies conflicts are becoming more frequent and more destructive. Environmental degradation is accelerating on dozens of worlds. The traditional approach to galactic civilization appears to be producing diminishing returns. Defense Minister. Hatak's crystalline structure brightened slightly, the equivalent of a nod. Ambassador Rodriguez, the Venloth Republic has observed these trends with growing concern. We joined this alliance not because we were certain it would work, but because we were increasingly certain that the alternatives were failing. That's exactly right, Minister. We're not asking anyone to abandon proven methods in favor of untested theories. We're asking everyone to consider whether the proven methods are actually still working. Scientific advisor Dr. Kelmyron made a sound that might have been laughter. Ambassador, the Kethloni have a saying, when the map no longer matches the territory, the problem is not with the territory. Perhaps it's time for galactic civilization to draw a new map. Elena looked around the table at the representatives of 7 species that 3 months ago had been operating according to completely different political, economic, and social principles. If we're all in agreement, I'd like to propose that we formalize the Terra Alliance with the signing of the Cooperative Governance Charter. One by one, the representatives indicated their agreement. As each species added their formal consent to the charter, Elena felt the weight of history settling on the moment. They weren't just forming an alliance. They were creating a new model for how intelligent species could relate to each other in a galaxy that had grown stagnant under the old rules. As the last signature was added to the charter, Elena stood to address the assembled representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings, today marks the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. We are no longer 7 separate species trying to compete for limited resources. We are 7 species working together to expand the resources available to everyone. And if the Galactic Council opposes us? Asked General Vexturus. Elena's smile carried a confidence that came from 6 months of watching human capabilities exceed every alien expectation. General, then the Council will learn what we've learned, that cooperation is more powerful than dominance. Innovation is more valuable than tradition, and the future belongs to those who are willing to build it together. As the representatives filed out to return to their worlds and begin implementing the alliance protocols, Elena remained behind to review the final documents. Trade Minister Liu Zhang joined her, along with General Marcus Kane and Dr. Sarah Chun. Well, Marcus said, we've officially committed humanity to a completely unprecedented political experiment. I hope we know what we're doing. Marcus, Sarah replied, 6 months ago, the galaxy thought we were too primitive to deserve council membership. Now we're the center of an alliance that's reshaping galactic politics. I think we can be forgiven for making up the rules as we go along. The real test, Liu added, will be how the council reacts. We've essentially created a competing power structure that threatens everything they've built their authority on. Elena looked out at Terra Station's bustling commercial district, where beings from dozens of species were working together in ways that defied every principle of traditional galactic politics. Then I guess we'd better make sure our way works better than theirs. The reaction from the Galactic Council was swift and predictable. High Chancellor Vex Mori stood before an emergency assembly, his crystalline form radiating the kind of controlled fury that came from having one's authority challenged by beings he still thought of as primitives. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's walls vibrate, we face an unprecedented challenge to galactic order. A collection of minor species, led by the humans we rejected for membership mere months ago, has declared the formation of what they call the Terra Alliance. The chamber erupted in sounds of disbelief and outrage. Ambassador Kretak of the Vorthan hegemony was the first to speak. Chancellor, this is intolerable. These primitive species are attempting to establish a competing authority structure without council approval or oversight. Furthermore, added War Commander Thecalon, whose presence at a council session indicated the military significance of the situation. This alliance includes species that have formal protection agreements with council members. The Altarians, Meridians, and Tori are all technically under the authority of established council protectorates. We're under our authority, corrected economic analyst Mortel of the Quadrian Trade Guild. All three species have formally withdrawn from their protection agreements, citing the economic benefits of alliance membership. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Protection agreements were the foundation of council authority, the formal acknowledgement by lesser species that they required council guidance and protection in exchange for tribute and compliance. If species were voluntarily abandoning council protection in favor of human alliance, what are our response options? Vex Mori asked. War Commander Thecalon was the first to respond. Military intervention. We deploy sufficient force to demonstrate that alliance with humans provides no protection against council authority, and risk open warfare with beings whose technological capabilities we still don't fully understand? Asked Council Speaker Yilandra, her energy form flickering with concern. Their capabilities are irrelevant, Thecalon insisted. Numbers matter in warfare. We represent 47 species with established military forces. They represent 7 species, most of which have minimal defensive capabilities. War Commander, interrupted intelligence analyst Quinder, our assessment of human military capabilities has been revised several times over the past months. Current projections suggest that direct military confrontation with the Terra Alliance would be unadvisable. Explain. The humans have demonstrated technologies that operate outside our understanding of military science. Their vessels can move undetected, strike without warning, and defend using methods that our weapons cannot counter. More importantly, they've been sharing these technologies with their alliance partners. The chamber fell silent again as the assembled representatives processed the idea that their overwhelming numerical advantage might not translate to military superiority. Economic pressure? Suggested Merchant Prince Velkoth, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Ineffective, replied economic analyst Mortel. The Terra Alliance has established economic independence from council-controlled trade networks. In fact, they're currently outcompeting council businesses in most major markets. Political isolation? Also ineffective. 17 additional species have submitted formal applications for alliance membership. The Terra Alliance is becoming more politically influential, not less. High Chancellor Vex Mori was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that all seemed to lead to unacceptable outcomes. Perhaps, he said finally, it's time for a different approach. Chancellor? Kretak asked. Perhaps it's time we discovered what makes these humans so effective. 1 week later, a single Xanthari courier ship approached Terra Station, broadcasting diplomatic identification codes and requesting permission for peaceful approach. Elena Rodriguez stood in the station's main docking bay, watching as High Chancellor Vex Mori materialized before her. For 6 months, she had wondered if she would ever see the being who had dismissed humanity as too primitive to matter. Chancellor Vex Mori, she said, inclining her head in a gesture of polite respect. Welcome to Terra Station. Ambassador. Rodriguez, Vex Mori replied, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been uncertainty. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Of course. Though I admit I'm curious about what brings the leader of the Galactic Council to visit a station operated by species he considers too primitive for council membership. Vex Mori was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with concepts that challenged 3 centuries of assumptions. Ambassador, I think it's possible that the Council may have misjudged your species' potential. Helena's expression remained carefully neutral. In what way? Your alliance has achieved in 6 months what most political structures require centuries to establish. Your economic innovations have revolutionized galactic commerce. Your technological developments have exceeded the capabilities of species with millions of years of advancement. And I'm beginning to think that our rejection of humanity's council application may have been premature. Helena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Chancellor, with respect, I don't think the problem was your timing. I think the problem was your criteria. Explain. You evaluated humanity based on whether we fit into the existing galactic order, whether our technology matched your technology, whether our politics resembled your politics, whether our approaches aligned with your approaches. Obviously, how else would we evaluate species for membership? You could evaluate species based on what they might contribute to improving the galactic order rather than maintaining it. Vex Mori's form flickered with confusion. The galactic order has maintained stability for millions of years. Why would we want to change it? Because stable and optimal aren't the same thing, Helena replied. Chancellor, when was the last time galactic civilization made a significant improvement? When did you last solve a problem that had been unsolvable? When did you last discover something that changed how you thought about the universe? Advanced civilizations focus on perfecting existing knowledge rather than pursuing speculative innovations. And what if that focus is preventing you from discovering knowledge that could make existence better for everyone? Elena gestured to the bustling commercial activity visible through the docking bay's viewports. 6 months ago, the species out there were competing for limited resources, fighting over territorial boundaries, and struggling with technological stagnation. Today, they're collaborating to expand available resources, sharing territorial benefits, and accelerating technological development at unprecedented rates. How is that possible? Because we stopped assuming that the way things had always been done was the way things had to be done. Vex Mori followed her gaze, watching alien species working together in ways that defied every principle of traditional galactic politics. Ambassador Rodriguez, what would happen if the Council requested guidance in implementing some of your innovations? Elena turned to face him, her expression serious. Chancellor, the Terra Alliance would be happy to share our approaches with any species genuinely interested in learning from them. But you'd need to understand that learning from us would require accepting that some of your fundamental assumptions about how civilization should work might be wrong. And if we're not ready to accept that, then you'll continue operating according to principles that produce the results you've been getting for millions of years. The only difference is that now you'll be competing with an approach that produces different results. Vex Mori was quiet for a long time, his crystalline mind processing implications that challenged everything he had believed about galactic civilization. What would such learning require? Cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives, collaborative problem-solving projects, and most importantly, the willingness to consider that species you've dismissed as primitive might have something valuable to teach you. That's... Vex Mori paused, his worldview struggling to accommodate such radical concepts. That's a significant departure from established diplomatic protocols. Chancellor, with respect, your established diplomatic protocols have produced a galaxy where technological development has stagnated, economic growth has plateaued, and interspecies conflicts are becoming more frequent and destructive. Maybe it's time to consider different protocols. As if to underscore her point, A priority communication arrived from the Terra Alliance's newest member, the Quidrian Trade Guild, had formally requested admission after their economic analysis indicated that guild worlds would be more prosperous as alliance members than as independent operators. Chancellor, Elena continued, I want you to think carefully about what you've observed here today. Then I want you to go back to the council and ask them a simple question. Do you want to spend the next million years competing with the Terra Alliance? Or do you want to spend them learning how to build something better than either of us could create alone? Vex Mori looked around the station one more time, his ancient consciousness struggling to process a reality that violated every assumption upon which his civilization had been built. I will consider your words, Ambassador Rodriguez. That's all we ask, Chancellor. That's all we've ever asked. As Vex Mori's courier ship departed Terra Station, Elena watched it disappear into the star field beyond. In the months since humanity's rejection by the Galactic Council, everything had changed. The species that had been dismissed as too primitive to matter had become the center of a growing alliance that was reshaping galactic civilization. The real question now was whether the established powers would adapt to the new reality or force a confrontation that nobody wanted. Elena suspected they were about to find out. 3 months after High Chancellor Vex Mori's visit to Terra Station, the galaxy reached a point of no return. The Zenthari Empire, facing economic collapse as more of their trading partners abandoned council-controlled commerce in favor of Terra Alliance membership, made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Emperor Drakmor stood before his assembled court, preparing to announce a choice that violated a million years of Zenthari tradition. My fellow Zenthari, he began, his crystalline form radiating the kind of resolve that comes from accepting inevitable change. For over 1 million years, our empire has been built on the foundation of technological supremacy and economic dominance. We have ruled through strength, governed through authority, and prospered through the control of resources and knowledge. The assembled court listened in silence, sensing that their emperor was about to announce something unprecedented. That era is ending, Drakmor continued. Not because our strength has diminished, not because our authority has been challenged, but because the galaxy itself is changing in ways that make our traditional approaches obsolete. He activated a holographic display showing economic and technological data from across Zenthari space. In the past year, 17 Zenthari Protectorate worlds have requested permission to join the Terra Alliance. Our manufacturing sectors are reporting efficiency rates that lag behind human-influenced operations by an average of 70%. Our research institutions are losing personnel to joint projects with alliance species at unprecedented rates. My Emperor, interrupted War Commander Thekalon, surely these temporary setbacks don't justify abandoning the principles that built our civilization. War Commander, these aren't temporary setbacks. They're indicators of a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization operates. The question before us is simple. Do we adapt to this new reality, or do we become irrelevant to it? The Emperor paused, allowing the weight of that choice to settle on his assembled advisors. I have made my decision. The Zenthari Empire formally requests membership in the Terra Alliance. The silence that followed was profound. In the million-year history of the Zenthari Empire, no emperor had ever voluntarily subordinated Zenthari interests to an external authority. My emperor, Economic Minister Yulvax said carefully, such a decision would require fundamental changes to our governmental structure, our economic policies, and our military doctrine. Yes, it would. And those changes will begin immediately. Emperor. Drakmor's announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within hours, similar declarations came from the Quidrian Trade Guild, the Venloth Republic, and the Meridian Collective. Species that had been members of the Galactic Council for millennia were abandoning the established order in favor of humanity's cooperative alliance. But the most significant defection came from an unexpected source. Council speaker Yil Andra of the Ethereal Collective stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council, her energy form flickering with the kind of uncertainty that beings of pure consciousness rarely experienced. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, "the Ethereal Collective has spent 6 million years as advocates for transcended consciousness, advanced intelligence, and evolved thought. We have believed, without question, that our mental development represented the pinnacle of what consciousness could achieve." The assembled representatives listened with growing unease, sensing that one of the Council's most influential members was about to make an unprecedented announcement. "Recent observations of human cognitive development have forced us to reconsider some of our fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness itself." Ambassador Kretak leaned forward. "Speaker Yilandra, surely you're not suggesting that primitive biological consciousness could rival the achievements of transcended consciousness?" "Ambassador Kretak, I'm suggesting that our transcended consciousness may have transcended certain limitations at the cost of imposing others. Human consciousness operates according to principles that our advanced intellects cannot replicate because we have evolved beyond the cognitive flexibility that makes those principles possible." The chamber erupted in shocked protests. The idea that advanced consciousness could be limited by its own advancement was philosophical heresy. "Furthermore," Yilandra continued, "human consciousness appears to be naturally developing transcendence capabilities without technological augmentation. They are achieving states of awareness that we required millions of years of guided evolution to attain. And they're doing it using methods we never discovered because we assumed such methods were impossible. What are you proposing?" "High Chancellor," Vex Mori asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "The Ethereal Collective formally requests membership in the Terra Alliance. We believe that learning from human consciousness development may be essential to the continued evolution of our own awareness." The chamber fell into stunned silence. If the Ethereal Collective, being so advanced they existed as pure thought, were requesting to learn from humans, what did that say about the assumptions upon which galactic civilization had been built? High Chancellor Vex Mori looked around the chamber at the scattered representatives of the once mighty Galactic Council. In the span of 6 months, humanity had gone from rejected applicant to the center of a growing alliance that now included some of the galaxy's most powerful and advanced species. "Chancellor," Ambassador Kretak said quietly, "what do we do?" "Now?" Vex Mori was quiet for a long moment, weighing 3 centuries of experience against 6 months of evidence that challenged everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization. "We do what we should have done 6 months ago," he said finally. "We learn." 1 year after humanity's rejection by the Galactic Council, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the assembly chamber of what was now being called the Galactic Cooperative Alliance, looking out at representatives from 43 different species, including most of the former council members. The chamber itself represented the philosophical shift that had transformed galactic civilization. Instead of the hierarchical arrangement that had characterized the old council, species were seated in concentric circles that emphasized equality and mutual respect. Advanced species sat beside primitive ones, energy beings shared space with biological creatures, and every voice carried equal weight in the alliance's decision-making process. "Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings," Elena began, 1 year ago, humanity applied for membership in the Galactic Council and was rejected as too primitive to contribute to galactic civilization. Today, we gather to formalize a new approach. to interspecies cooperation that has revolutionized every aspect of galactic society. She activated a holographic display showing comparative data from the past year. In 12 months, the Alliance has achieved technological advances that exceeded the previous millennium's progress. Economic prosperity has increased across all member worlds by an average of 400%. Interspecies conflicts have dropped to the lowest levels in recorded galactic history. Environmental restoration projects have successfully rehabilitated 17 previously uninhabitable worlds. High Chancellor Vex Mori, now serving as the Xanthari representative to the Alliance, stood to address the Assembly. Ambassador Rodriguez, speaking for the species that once dismissed humanity as primitive, I want to acknowledge that our greatest mistake was not recognizing your potential. It was failing to recognize our own limitations, he gestured to. The assembled representatives, beings from dozens of worlds working together in ways that would have been unimaginable under the old order. The Galactic Council operated on the assumption that advanced civilizations naturally evolved beyond the need for innovation, adaptation, and growth. We believe that reaching technological maturity meant achieving a stable state that should be maintained rather than transcended. And what do you believe now? Asked Trade Minister Liu Jiang. I believe that we confused stagnation with stability, optimization with improvement, and dominance with leadership. The humans didn't just teach us new technologies, they taught us to think about technology differently. They didn't just share their innovations, they taught us how to innovate. Emperor Drakmar of the Xanthari Empire rose to speak, his massive crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lighting in complex patterns. Ambassador Rodriguez, the Xanthari Empire has experienced more technological and economic advancement in the past year than in the previous 10,000 years. Not because we discovered new knowledge, but because we learned to apply existing knowledge in ways we had never considered. How so, Your Imperial Majesty? Human engineers working with Xanthari facilities have increased our manufacturing efficiency by implementing techniques that our optimization protocols had dismissed as suboptimal. Human economists working with our trade networks have expanded our commerce by pursuing market strategies that our analysis had indicated were unprofitable. Human scientists working with our research institutions have solved problems by asking questions that our expertise had taught us were meaningless. Dr. Sarah Chun, now serving as the Alliance's Chief Science Advisor, stood to present the latest research findings. The past year has produced breakthrough discoveries in 17 different scientific disciplines, faster-than-light communication, using quantum consciousness entanglement, terraforming techniques that work with planetary ecosystems instead of against them, medical treatments that integrate biological, mechanical, and energy-based healing methods. And what made these breakthroughs possible? Asked Council Speaker Yilandra. Cognitive diversity, Sarah replied. Human intuitive thinking combined with Xanthari logical analysis, ethereal consciousness manipulation integrated with Vorthan biological engineering, Quiterian economic modeling enhanced by Altarian environmental science. Every breakthrough resulted from combining different ways of thinking about the same problems. As the session continued, representatives from dozens of species described similar experiences, ancient problems solved through fresh perspectives, impossible challenges overcome through collaborative innovation, and civilizations revitalized through exposure to different approaches. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. 1 year ago, Elena said as the session drew to a close, galactic civilization was built on the assumption that different species represented competitors for limited resources. Today, we've proven that different species represent complementary capabilities for unlimited growth. She looked around the chamber at beings who had spent millions of years believing that their way of existing was superior to all alternatives. We didn't just form an alliance. We discovered that diversity isn't a weakness to be managed, it's a strength to be leveraged. That innovation isn't a risk to be avoided, it's an opportunity to be embraced. That cooperation isn't a limitation on individual achievement, it's a multiplier for collective success. High Chancellor Vexmori stood one final time. Ambassador Rodriguez, I want to read something into the official record. 6 months ago, I told you that your species might be worthy of reconsidering for council membership after you achieved basic civilizational competence. Today, I want to formally acknowledge that humanity has taught the galaxy what civilizational competence actually means. Thank you, Chancellor, but I think you're missing the point. Which is, we didn't teach the galaxy anything. We learned from the galaxy, and the galaxy learned from us, and together we discovered capabilities that none of us possessed alone. Helena paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of species that now work together as equals rather than competing as rivals. A year ago, you thought humans were nothing. Today, we've all discovered that when beings work together instead of against each other, everyone becomes something more than they could be alone. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval that transcended species boundaries, crystalline harmonics, energy fluctuations, biological vocalizations, and mechanical resonances combining into a symphony of unity that had never been heard in galactic history. As the session ended and representatives prepared to return to their worlds, Helena remained behind with her closest advisors. Well, General Marcus Kane said, we've officially restructured galactic civilization. I hope we haven't bitten off more than we can chew. Marcus, Dr. Sarah Chen replied, 6 months ago the galaxy was stagnant, conflict-ridden, and pessimistic about the future. Today it's innovative, cooperative, and excited about possibilities that no one had ever imagined. I think we can be forgiven for aiming high. The real test, Trade Minister Liu Jiang added, will be whether this new approach can handle the challenges we haven't encountered yet. Elena looked out at the bustling Alliance headquarters, where beings from dozens of species were working together on projects that defied every principle of traditional galactic politics. Then I guess we'd better make sure we keep learning how to meet challenges that no one has faced before. 5 years after humanity's rejection by the Galactic Council, Elena Rodriguez stood in her office overlooking New Geneva, the capital city of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Through the massive viewport, she could see beings from dozens of species walking together through streets designed to accommodate every form of intelligent life the galaxy had discovered. At 63, she had become something she never expected: to be the first human president of galactic civilization. The role had been created not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through the simple recognition that the species that had initiated the galactic transformation should help guide its continued development. Madam President, her assistant announced, you have a priority communication from the Andromedian Contact Commission. Elena accepted the transmission, and a holographic image of a being unlike any she had ever seen materialized in her office. It appeared to be composed of crystallized light arranged in geometric patterns that suggested vast intelligence. President Rodriguez, the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through multiple dimensions. I am Coordinator Zephythaz of the Andromedian Galactic Collective. We have been observing your civilization's remarkable ... transformation with great interest. Elena inclined her head respectfully. Coordinator Zephythaz, it's an honor to meet a representative of Andromedan civilization. What can we do for you? President Rodriguez, the Andromedian Collective has existed for over 50 million years. We have achieved technological capabilities that transcend the limitations of physical reality. We have transcended individual consciousness to become a unified galactic intelligence. We have solved every problem that we could conceive of solving. That sounds impressive. It is also profoundly limiting. We have become so advanced that we have lost the ability to grow, to change, to discover anything genuinely new. We have achieved perfection at the cost of possibility. Elena was beginning to understand where this conversation was leading. And you're interested in our approach because in 50 million years of existence, we have never observed a civilization achieve what yours has accomplished in 5 years. You have created a form of galactic organization that produces continuous innovation, adaptation, and growth. You have made diversity a source of strength rather than conflict. You have proven that cooperation can exceed the capabilities of any individual species, no matter how advanced. Coordinator, I appreciate the compliment, but I think you may be overestimating our achievements. President Rodriguez, in 5 years, your alliance has solved technological problems that we have been struggling with for millions of years. You have developed social structures that eliminate the conflicts that have plagued our civilization since its inception. You have created economic systems that expand prosperity rather than redistributing scarcity. The Andromedian being paused, its crystalline form flickering with what might have been uncertainty. We would like to learn from your approach. Elena was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of a 50-million-year-old galactic civilization requesting guidance from a species that 5 years ago had been considered too primitive for basic recognition. Coordinator, we would be honored to share our experiences with Andromedian civilization. But I want you to understand something important. We didn't develop our approach by trying to become the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We developed it by accepting that we weren't the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Explain. Our strength doesn't come from knowing more than everyone else. It comes from acknowledging how much we can learn from everyone else. The moment you start thinking you're too advanced to learn from primitive species is the moment you stop advancing. Elena activated a holographic display showing the current structure of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Coordinator, we have species in our alliance that range from barely spacefaring to transcended consciousness. Every one of them contributes something that no one else can provide. Our most advanced members learn from our most primitive ones, and our most primitive members are elevated by our most advanced ones. And this diversity is a source of strength? It's the source of strength. Homogeneity leads to stagnation. Diversity leads to innovation. The Andromedian coordinator was quiet for a long moment, its vast intelligence processing concepts that challenged 50 million years of assumptions. President Rodriguez, the Andromedian Collective formally requests guidance in implementing cooperative development protocols. Coordinator, we would be delighted to help. But you need to understand that implementing our approach would require accepting that your 50 million years of advancement might have left you less capable in some areas than species with 50 years of advancement. That's the coordinator paused, its crystalline form flickering with what might have been philosophical distress. That's a significant conceptual adjustment. It was for us too, Coordinator. 5 years ago, we were convinced that we had to prove we were as advanced as everyone else. Today, we've learned that being different from everyone else is more valuable than being the same as everyone else. Elena looked out at the bustling city below, where beings from across the galaxy worked together on projects that no single species could have imagined. Coordinator, you mentioned that the Andromedian Collective has solved every problem you could conceive of solving. Would you be interested in learning how to conceive of new problems to solve? That would be revolutionary? Elena, Suggested with a smile. Exactly. Then welcome to the galaxy's newest learning experience, Coordinator. You're about to discover that the most advanced thing any civilization can do is admit it still has more to learn. As the transmission ended, Helena reflected on the incredible journey that had brought humanity from galactic rejects to galactic leaders. 5 years ago, they had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. Today, civilizations that had existed for millions of years were asking to learn from human approaches to existence. But perhaps the most remarkable thing was that none of it had happened through conquest, domination, or force. It had happened through the simple recognition that cooperation worked better than competition, that diversity was stronger than homogeneity, and that the best way to prove your worth was to help others discover theirs. A chime indicated another. Incoming communication. Elena accepted it to find High Chancellor Vexmori's familiar crystalline form. President Rodriguez, he said, I wanted to inform you that the latest census results are in. The Galactic Cooperative Alliance now includes 237 species across 4 different galaxies. We've exceeded every projection for growth, prosperity, and stability. That's wonderful news, Chancellor. Any challenges we need to address? Just one. We've received applications for membership from several species that exist in dimensions we can't perceive and communicate through methods we don't understand. Our xenosociologists are having trouble developing integration protocols for beings that don't exist in any recognizable form. Helena laughed. Chancellor, remember when our biggest challenge was convincing people that humans were intelligent enough to deserve recognition? Those were simpler times, Vexmori agreed with what passed for humor among crystalline beings. Chancellor, I want you to set up a working group to develop protocols for integrating non-dimensional species. Include representatives from all our Salarella, most cognitively diverse members, and don't worry about whether their approaches seem logical or practical. Understood, President. And President Rodriguez? Yes? 5 years ago, when I dismissed humanity as too primitive to matter, I was demonstrating the greatest failure of advanced intelligence, the assumption that superiority comes from not needing to learn anything new. And what do you think now? I think the most advanced thing any being can do is remain curious about what they don't know yet. As Elena ended the communication and prepared to leave her office, she reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. 5 years ago, it had been a place where ancient civilizations competed for dominance over younger species. Today, it was a place where beings from across the cosmos collaborated to discover possibilities that none of them could achieve alone. The species that had once been dismissed as nothing had become the catalyst for everyone becoming something more than they had ever imagined possible. And the greatest discovery of all was that there was always more to discover. Hey there, incredible. Humans, what an absolutely mind-blowing journey we just experienced together. From cosmic laughingstock to galactic leaders in 5 years, that's what I call the ultimate underdog story. I want to know, which moment in this epic transformation gave you the biggest chills? Was it when the Xanthari Empire realized humans had better military tech? When the ancient ethereal collective asked to learn from human consciousness? Or when 50-million-year-old Andromedans admitted they needed human guidance? This story proves something incredible about our species. Our greatest strength isn't our technology or our military might. It's our ability to see potential where others see problems, to find opportunity where others find obstacles, and to build bridges where others build walls. In our real world, we face challenges that seem impossible: climate change, poverty, conflict, disease. But this story reminds us that sometimes the most primitive approach is the most revolutionary one. Sometimes asking, what if we tried something completely different, is more powerful than perfecting what's always been done. Drop a comment. below telling me about a time when being the outsider or the underestimated one gave you an advantage. And absolutely smash that like button if you believe humanity's greatest superpower is our refusal to accept that impossible means impossible. I've got another incredible story lined up about what happens when humans encounter a galactic AI that's achieved perfect logic and accidentally teach it how to doubt itself. Trust me, you won't want to miss humanity's next impossible victory. Remember, sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is admit you're still learning. See you in the next one, Galactic Leaders.